Terrible events in Australia over the weekend. But there's a differentiator here, of course. There are those mass shootings that sadly seem to be all too common in the United States, that tend to be just sort of disaffected or even mentally ill young white boys who've been behind that for whatever terrible reasons that put them in that situation. But of course, there are these hate crimes that are driven by plain and simple, good old-fashioned religious extremism. And this, sadly, I mean, we don't know the full facts of Australia yet, but the fact is it was clearly an anti-Semitic attack. I think the event speaks for itself. So clearly and presumably it was driven by religious extremism. And sadly, these events are increasingly occurring across Western democratic nations. We, of course, have suffered them here in the United Kingdom on several occasions, sadly. These mass killings driven by religious extremism. And they tend to come from the Islamic community. I'm not tarnishing the whole Islamic community, of course. Again, it's the extremist element that is behind this. And sadly, and one of the uncomfortable facts really in life is that there are countries out there and there are communities and societies out there that wish to do us harm, particularly us here in the West. And we have become our own worst enemies because, of course, and this is where the West and why Sikhi aligns so closely with Western values, because the Sikh community suffers the same disadvantage, and this has come up regularly, is that we are our own worst enemies because we are seen as weak, because we are accepting, we are inviting, we are kind, we invite these people into our societies. We've lowered the barriers to let these extremists in, and you know, our default position is we trust them first, and then if they betray that trust, then we try and react. But that has of course, as I say, the Sikh community have suffered that same issue where Sikhs by default are open, kind, generous and trusting, but you know, you betray them and God help you, that's another situation. But ultimately that means that they are taken advantage of, and people out there, societies and extremists out there in the world are taking advantage of Western society. And I mean, you know, I don't even need to sort of say which direction that comes from. It sadly happens all too frequently in the West. These attacks from it tends to be, generally speaking, Islamic extremism. Ironically, it's also Indian extremism, which is another aspect to all this. But ultimately, we have become our own worst enemies.